Welcome, everybody. This is Dame Crawford here with Arc Republic, here with Kaya Shivers and Miss CC Strong. She is here to give us some insight on what's going on as being the wife of a sheriff candidate of Eric Strong, who's running for sheriff. And then she's going to give us her own personal story, which I think is powerful in itself. So I want to make sure we give her the room, give her the platform to tell us everything that we would want to know about being a Black woman and law enforcement here on Arc Republic.
Let's embark on the Arc Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.
Thank you for joining us here today on Arc Republic. We have Lieutenant Sidra Strong here, who's the wife of Eric Strong, who's running for LA Sheriff. She is here to tell us her story. And before we get into this interview, I have to tell you guys, just a note from us, me and my podcast, Uncle Radio, we are throwing a meet and greet for Eric Strong's campaign tomorrow. So I just want to be transparent about that and let you guys know before we get into all this. But we want to tell Lieutenant's story. So let's get into it.
And also, I want to say, as an editor-in-chief at Arc Republic, we thought it was necessary that Lieutenant Sherrod-Strong tells her story, because it's very, very far and few you hear a Black woman who is in law enforcement talking about her experiences and being in law enforcement for such a long time. So thank you so much. We do appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So
glad to be here.
Good. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What attracted you to pursue a career in law enforcement? Let's start there.
I don't know that it was so much of an attraction. I wanted to actually be a pediatrician in high school. I was sort of a most likely to succeed, at least in my own mind, type of student. I was a pretty good student and I loved to write, but I had this desire to be a doctor. I joined the military out of high school instead of going to college because that's what was expected. And I'm really one of those that doesn't stay within these parameters. So I joined the military. Coming back from the military, my parents were really big in the community. So we lived in Compton and they were working a booth at Exposition Park. So as I'm walking through the park, the recruiter from the sheriff's department is waving me over. And I'm thinking, no, I don't, I've seen some things that have happened that I didn't care for growing up. My brothers, some things they experienced. So law enforcement is probably not for me. Well, long story short, the recruiter knew my dad and that was her in. So she walks over to my dad, starts talking to him. My dad's like, yeah, fill out the form. And she says, you walk like you're in the military. I said, yes, I am. And she said, we need people like you in law enforcement. Filled out the card, put it on a shelf, didn't think anything of it, got it, information in the mail that I was going to go for a test, put it up on the shelf, didn't think anything of it. The day before I was supposed to go to the test, I happened to see this envelope and I'm reading and I'm like, oh, shoot, this is tomorrow on a Saturday. I don't have anything to do. Let me go down there and take it. I took the test. And as the people were standing up on the stage. So one side, if you heard your name called, you passed and the person was holding a packet to carry on to the next phase. On the other side was another person standing and they would call if you failed the test. So when I heard my name called, I thought I failed the test. So I'm thinking I'm not walking on stage to get my California ID and get embarrassed for not passing. And then soon enough, they call my name enough. I'm heading up the stairs and they say, okay, if you don't want this opportunity, you've passed the test. And I'm, oh, that's me. And I go screaming and running back down the stairs. The rest is 27, almost 27 in a few months here. The rest is history. And I can tell you just as good and bad of being a Black woman in law enforcement.
Well, yeah, we definitely going to get into that because I know that is an experience in itself. Me and Kaya often talk about just the experience of being a Black woman in almost any job, right? Being a Black woman in almost any place in corporate America. So I can imagine the things that come with the regular of being a Black woman, but being a Black woman in law enforcement, I'm sure that comes with its own different sets of challenges. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about your home life, because it's very interesting, right? So you are, you know, in law enforcement, your husband is running for sheriff, and he's also been in law enforcement for around 30 years, 32 years or something like that.
Yes, he's just shy of 30.
Yeah, 30 years. So you got 30 years of law enforcement, 27 for you. And you guys have 3 beautiful children, 2 boys and a girl. Tell me about how you two came together as a couple, and about how this home life works out with 2 sheriffs on this kind of job, and having 3 kids and raising 3 kids. Please give me some insight on how that works.
So Eric and I actually worked together before we got married, and we were working with the youth. We were both DARE instructors. That's where I first met him. Really cool, became friends. We didn't marry until 2010, so years later, but I met him in 2001, I believe, is when LASD took over Compton PD, and he was absorbed into our department. Work with him, he was always about, like, I want to say mentoring or training, not only the officers, but would bend down with kids. And it was something about him with how he interacted with kids and mentoring them that just had me, you know, right off the bat, like, this guy is really, really awesome. As far as our children, life with them at home with 2 law enforcement, you can just imagine, they have 2 law enforcement officers as parents. It was kind of a revolving door, because we always made sure that one person was on, like, night shift, or what we call EM shift, and then the other one had to work days. So a lot of it would be passing the baton, because we had small children that we had to look after. We're a blend, but we don't say step in our home. So that's not a step children, or in any way, we don't refer to each other as that. And so we are, I mean, amazing family. I can't, you know, I'll brag about my kids and I'll take up your whole time. So you don't really want to get me started on my kids. My oldest is working in security. My daughter just got an internship with the Clippers G League and has been working with them for a couple months. And then our youngest son just passed his EMT test for emergency medical technician, and he's applying for the fire department. So family life it's crazy. It's handing off a lot of, hey, the kids have got to go to sports and here and this and that. So I'm glad that they're now 21, 22, and 24, and we're pushing them out of the nest a little bit, but still supporting them.
Cece, thank you so much. I said this in the pre-show, but I really appreciate you selecting ARC Republic as the platform to tell your story. I have a couple of questions in the outline of your life. You are coming into one, can you explain for those who are not familiar with the law enforcement structure in Los Angeles? Because you have LAPD and then you have LASD. What does that look like?
Well, LAPD is the city of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department deals with the county. So you have 23 stations that we patrol, and some in unincorporated areas. The Sheriff's Department, the biggest difference, I would say, is patrolling more so with LAPD, whereas we're entrusted also with the courts and custody, which are different from what they actually are in charge of. So that's basically the biggest difference. And those city defines lines and the areas we serve.
So do you have different precincts, or do you share precincts?
No, we are totally separate with our stations compared to theirs.
But do you do investigative work together sometimes? How does that go?
It's not really together, because if you look at it in pockets, whatever area the crime happens in, that's it'd be like a rooms in a house. Mm-hmm. So your bedroom is close to mine, and whatever happened, the spills on the carpet, it's yours to handle. Okay. And to clean. But that same analogy, mom might make me come over there and help you. So there's a mutual aid depending on something that happens. So let's see the high-speed chases that you see on television. Sometimes that crosses over lines. So it's important to work together with the other agencies so that we're all working for the same purpose and the goal. Okay. But we do have differences as far as what we're in charge of.
Okay, so I kind of did the math in terms of when you're coming into the sheriff's department, which is around the Rodney King beating, right? So this is early 90s.
For me coming on, I came on in 95, but I did experience being deployed and helping at what was the Carson Mall back then.
Oh, right, during the riots.
Pacific Bank. Yes, Security Pacific Bank was where we had a base, and it was protecting the mall and the surrounding areas in Carson. So I was in the military at the time. I joined the sheriff's department in July of 1995.
Okay, so this is several years after. LA is still in its rebuilding phase during this time. You briefly mentioned that your brother had some incidents with the LA sheriffs. Can you explain what was the relationship then between the Black community and law enforcement? And how did you negotiate that with joining?
I think that because of the mistrust, that is almost, I want to say innate in a way, because of the experiences, I saw things like, and when you asked me that, something in particular came to mind, where they were looking for a suspect that drove a blue van. And my dad had a blue van. And I remember my brother pulling up in front of the house, and the police, Compton PD, they came up on the van, and they were, kind of surrounding it in a sense. And they had him lay down on the grass. They're, checking for him. And, what did you do with this? I'm on the porch as a kid. That's my brother. I know he's a knucklehead, in my mind, from a kid standpoint. I'm thinking, oh, he's just a knucklehead around here teasing me. But I know my dad's rules in the house, and he would not have allowed the things that he was supposed to have done. Well, the image that I remember the most was that after they realized he wasn't who they were searching for, it was kind of like, yeah, get up and get on. And for me, that was like, that wasn't something that I would have been wanting to be involved in, especially as a kid. But as I grew older, I balanced that with what I was being taught in the home. I'll give you an example of that. I am of the philosophy that we need to look at history, all of it, not just the parts that look good. Because my parents taught me not just celebrating July 4th for the 4th of July, but we celebrated Juneteenth. I learned what that was as a kid. I learned about, the Indians. It wasn't just the Horn of Plenty where you're coloring that little page and the Indians were skipping around and happy that people were coming over and discovering America. I remember getting in trouble when I was in the 3rd grade because I raised my hand in class and said, well, if Christopher Columbus discovered America, weren't the Indians already here? And I lost recess for that. Like, you actually are not going to go out to recess. My mother was upset about it. And I remember her going to the school in jeans and a t-shirt. And she walked in and she said, my daughter missed her recess yesterday. She'll have both recesses today. And we'll take whatever she misses in class, and I'll go home with her and I'll work with her. Because my mother was a firm believer that you need to know truth. And then you make the decision on what you do with that. So growing up and seeing my brother on the grass, and then kind of, hey, okay, you realize that this is not who you're looking for. It wouldn't be until years later as an officer that I would see that, and the image of that was what was missing was not the fact that he should not have been stopped. So hear me out on that. Because they're looking in the neighborhood to catch someone who actually did do something wrong. What bothered me the most is that there was no cleanup. And when I say cleanup, I don't mean clean up and hide and tuck it under a rug, but you didn't dust him off. You didn't tell him, hey, this is why we did what we did. And I get it that sometimes you don't have the time for that if it's something that's happening and involving right now. But they did not give him the dignity of saying, hey, I just picked you out of a randomly, but it's connected to the van. And they didn't actually tell him, hey, we're sorry. Here, just get your stuff and get on, was basically what I remember.
So with that being said, after that, you get into law enforcement. How do you, because I've had a lot of conversations with you. I've had a lot of conversations with Eric. And how do I say this in the politically correct way? Y'all still real Black folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I even had some police friends who changed so much, like cats I went to high school with, like I can't even have conversations with them because they're like straight there. To me, they're just cops. Like the person I knew, the connection to the Black culture is gone, right? But I talk to you and Eric all the time, and y'all, like, y'all still Black folks. Like, we still have Black folk conversation. How did y'all keep that, especially being inside for so many years?
I think it's a lesson again in what I was raised with and what I was taught, and to know my own truth and know who I am. You have to realize that I also have a bit of an edge because I'm not accepted anyway. And let me hear me clearly.
Mhm.
And that's on both sides. That's not just in the uniform, but even from my own side with, how could you join the popo? You know, that's the enemy. What are you doing? And then there's the side of, I'm not in the locker room with the majority of the men. And I'm not saying just the white or Hispanic or Asian or, you know, any other race, my own actually sometimes. It's a huge dynamic because my gender comes into play with that. But when you say, how do I remain the same? I'm going to be honest with you, Dame, I'm lazy. And when I tell people that, they're shocked. They're like, no, you work so hard, you do. I am the laziest person in the world. You know why? Because I want to do it right the first time so I don't have to keep repeating it. And so I work to do the job the way that it was intended. The underlying to that is respect, making sure that people are treated fairly. I'm not your judge and jury. I don't decide your fate on whatever has happened. And so the base for me is very spiritual, and I'm grounded in who I am. And my thing is, until you give me a reason to do anything negative, you're sir, you're ma'am, I don't know this individual. And I just was never raised to mistreat and dislike other people. So what you see for me in uniform is my professionalism, because we're paid to be professional. The people on the street are not. And it's when I insert, how I feel about politics, how I feel about people that don't look like me, how I feel about, this is what I do with my family, so everyone else should learn my style. It's a recipe for disaster. And it's why we're in the problems that we're in. Newsflash, my parents were not perfect. And they were really great people. And I'm so glad for their imperfections, because I learned not to actually have this rigid, I have to succeed. And you know what it did? It was a support that it's okay for me to fail so I can go out there and actually drive to do things. I try to pour that into the people that I am actually talking to. Even those that are entrusted within our custody or that we encountered in our passing, I want to leave an impact on them that we're not all bad. And nobody is all of anything. I'm not all just a Black woman that has all these issues and things that I've been, called from both sides of the fence. And I'm not just this hard shell robot as an officer. And I'm a pretty tough cookie. I can hold my own. So it doesn't have to be overbearing in your delivery in any situation with any human being. So what you see of me, I'm lazy. It's easier just to be who I am in both settings.
Okay, and I like that. And so, speaking of you being yourself and you being you, the other day, I had a chance to watch was it CBS, the debate on CBS?
Yes.
With Eric Strong and the other candidates, and things got a little testy between Eric and Sheriff Villanueva, and it sounds like, Villanueva basically just made up something on the spot to try to throw dirt on Eric's name. And Eric, to his credit, came back with a great response. I want to get your take as first a wife, because I know that had to make you feel a certain type of way where you you go into protection mode because you're like, yo, he's lying on my husband, da da da. So I want to get your take on that exchange as a wife, but then also that exchange as an officer because I saw a lot of unprofessionalism, even in the way that Villanueva was responding, the way he was talking down to all the other candidates. So I want to get your take on both sides, and then just give me a little bit of insight on how you feel about the other candidates or what you know of them.
Oh, okay. You're gonna put me on the spot. Oh, like, look, that's
just a little bit. I
get it. If I was encapsulating it all in a word, I would say disgusted. and even as I'm sitting here trying to answer the question for you, I knew immediately that it wasn't true. There's nothing that I can do about it. I'm sitting on a computer in our kitchen, and Eric's on the computer, actually the one that I'm sitting at right now. And I had to put my hand over my mouth because I wanted to shout out, that's a lie. I believe that Eric put in the chat that is, he actually put that in that chat during that forum. And I, for a second, panicked because I'm thinking, how must that ear, if it sounds like that to me, and it's not directed at me, how does that sound to my husband receiving it? So it's good you asking me the question to separate the officer or the lieutenant from the wife, because they are clearly two different perspectives. And I will usually run things through my mind in this whole campaign process through both, because I think I get lost for the career that I hold because I'm the candidate's wife. It's a different dynamic when you are both in the profession and one of you is running for office. But I knew right away Eric would handle it the way I've always seen him handle things. I think this guy is made of cucumber water because he's so calm no matter what is presented to him. And I can be arguing with this guy and he looks at me and he has this hand gesture and he could just walk away and I'm still chipping. Like, where are you going? I got something else to say. But he was so poised and eloquent in how he delivered the return. But a wife knows her husband's face.
Right. The
lieutenant knew that it was false because I was actually his partner at that youth center that the sheriff was speaking about at the time. So the law enforcement side of me knew this is not correct, but the wife side of me is looking at my husband's face and trying to see on the Zoom, oh, please don't hammer him. But I also knew that he would not, and he was very poised in his delivery. We have a history with the current sheriff that dates back 17 years. I am actually working on a documentary to let that story be told because I feel people need to know. One of the key things that I've been hearing, because a lot of people talk on the department when things start happening on the department, is why has she waited so long for some of the things that I reported with the news? They don't even know the time frames, but immediately we jump to judgment. No one called. Hey, when did this happen? What are you talking about? No one asked. And I will give you a brief of it, a glimpse into it. It's 17 years ago, and that's more like probably 16 by calculation. In 2005, Alex launched a grenade and lied on us both. And there was written proof.
Launched a live grenade.
No, not a live grenade.
Oh, okay.
Grenade.
Oh,
I'm using it as an analogy.
What is going on?
I wouldn't be sitting here if he had blown me up with a grenade. But when I say a grenade, it was because it was just all completely false. Mm-hmm. And then when we were almost put under investigation for it, but had written proof to place on the desk in front of the supervisor who was presenting this to us, and then it all just went away. And I never got the information of what happens to him. Since he told this lie on us as a supervisor, does anything actually happen to him? As far as other things with him, and to your point, Dame, speaking about the professionalism, and you asked me about, what makes me able to still be within my, culture and who I am as a person and still wear the uniform. The uniform. I think if I was labeling how his behavior is, if anyone goes back and watches that forum, you will see what I consider childlike behavior, chuckles, a little nervousness, condescending remarks and outbursts. It's really, to me, I was embarrassed. I was actually embarrassed for him because the world gets to see that.
Well, I wanted to comment on that. Like Dame sent me I didn't see the whole debate, admittedly. Dame sent me the piece where Villanueva said made some accusations, and then Mr. Strong said that's a complete lie. I'm sitting here as somebody who is from a family who's, and has not only just family, but, being from the communities that we're from, a horrible history with the sheriff's department, especially the Lennox sheriffs, right? That was the notorious one for us. If an officer is going to lie on a candidate in public on a debate, what in the hell did this, excuse my language, did this guy do to just the average citizen? That really made me very, very, very uneasy that he had the gall and the arrogance to do that, and knows that he can do it without any consequence. So he thinks. I mean, of course, we want him to face the fire. But how do you, as a Black woman officer, know that, right? And saying that 17 years ago, this is something that's been going on. How when you were talking about you negotiate two sides, right? One being excluded as a woman, the other being excluded as, why are you in an agency that historically has terrorized Black communities in LA? I know I'm putting extras on it, but it's that type of behavior that we experience that I think makes the question very valid. Like, how do you? I mean, and let me say this, I work in the academy. The academy is racist as hell, right? And so I'm in constant negotiation about a whole bunch of stuff, right? So you're not alone, but I really, truly, like, when I saw that, I'm like, if he did this to a colleague candidate, all the people that he's like, that's all I could think of. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I didn't look at it in that context, and you posing it that way at the time that it happened. But you got to understand, you just said it, 17 years of this. And that wasn't the only incident, because there were incidents that happened after that. But I want to put you in the mind of the term that they call me the whistleblower. You know what I mean? I think that's what the title is in the headline or headlines. Those are eye-catching words that grab people's attention. And it's also an actual law that you can't retaliate against someone who brings forward anything that is negative in nature. But and I shouldn't say anything negative in nature, but someone breaks a law in a company and the person says, hey, we were not supposed to do this, and they report it, and then all of a sudden you're dogpile on them. I think in what you just described, as you're telling me that, it should be alarming to others. It's very unprofessional. It's very drowning man grabs for anything to save themselves. I think it's because he really knows what he did to us. The problem was he never stopped to say, hey, let me meet these two individuals so that I can get to know them before I actually hammer them or, complain about their work or question everything. And without getting into too much detail, there was a sergeant that was our supervisor before him. And he actually got in trouble and was taken out of the position because he wasn't doing his job. I was. So in comes Alex, and the same thing you were doing with that sergeant, you need to continue it. And so in essence, you want me to be the smart person behind the scenes doing the work, hand it to you, and then you submit it as if it's your own. And that is not good. So when you say that, yes, I could see where that would really cause alarm for someone, because they, I think it's a thought with, if he would, and you say that very well. I remember being stopped here recently I was going a little fast, I'll admit it. So I get pulled over and this officer comes to the window. My heart's pumping, especially with all that's going on, because nobody knows who I am when I'm actually being pulled over. But there's certain language that I would know that other people wouldn't know to speak to this officer. And I'm kind of, I know what he's looking like walking up to the car. So I know what his images are. So there's certain behavior pattern and even conversations that we would have. I have the ability to bring that down a notch. Some people don't. If they don't know and they are upset and why are you pulling me over? And there's a lot going, you have all these questions. So I can imagine what you're saying. If he's able to lie like that on national television on another officer, what else is he hiding? But I'm here to tell you, 17 years ago, he was hiding another lie. So where it's alarming to you, it's not to me because it's who he is. My only experience with him has been that behavior, and the same exact demeanor that I saw all those years ago, I'm seeing it now. It has not changed. So I could understand anyone questioning, and I would relish and be really happy to hear what his answer would be to that. That's harder for me to answer than it would be him, because it's his own behavior, his beliefs, what are your belief systems? What are your issues with people that look different from you? Which in a lot of the forums and things that I'm hearing, there was recently an article that he feels like Black people are in the news too much. And here's my brief on that. Let's say, for instance, there's 3-month time window, and this is all not actual numbers. So let me put that disclaimer on it. But in a 3-month time window, you have 90 Black on Black crimes, because that was his thing. There people are being, in the Black community, that's primarily with them, with these issues. You have 90 Black on Black crimes over here. And let's say that you have 5 LASD shootings where they didn't have a gun or they got shot in the back, whatever it is. Which one is the most important to you as a sheriff? Is it the 90?
It should be the dirty shootings in your department.
It should be. But the numbers, if you think about it, if I can point and deflect and not answer the actual question, if I can get from somebody's shiny ball, look over here, but they, it's Black on Black crime over there. Remember I said, people in the communities are not paid to be professional. We are. And I am a firm believer that I can't tell my mom, hey, my sister didn't clean up her room. And mom, look at all these problems that she has. Ooh, and the pillows are on the floor and the dirty clothes are hanging all out of the doorway. Until I go and fix my own dirty clothes, pick up my pillows, clean up my room, it's hard to finger point. The point that I'm trying to make is that clean up what's within your control, and then seek to worry about all of the things that we have to do. And yes, they do work hand in hand, but to point fingers and say Black on Black crime is out of control. So almost like, what do you expect? What do you want from us? That was what I got from that particular article. And you understand who I am, being what I consider both, +1, because I also have the gender piece. So I have 3 different things that hit me square in the face each day. When I walk out of my home, when I put my uniform on, I have to think about those things all the time. But his level of anger is because I was questioned about his behavior all those years ago. So he sees me as testifying against him. And it's been just, to me, malicious, and you're on a vendetta to get retribution. That's why that was, even brought up. I think that they were speaking about me at the time. Pat Harvey had asked a question about his wife, meaning Eric. The question was posed to him, but it was interesting that it was more of that was never really addressed. It was immediately, well, you got to know Mr. Strong did this, that, or the other. I saw that as, you have nowhere to go. So let me throw something out there. And you should be alarmed, because if that was said to a fellow officer, what are you willing to do when no one is looking?
Absolutely.
It goes back to me being the lazy person that I spoke of. I'm too lazy to go, oh, okay, the camera's on right now, so let me square my shoulders and snap to attention. I'm too lazy for all that. It's easier for me to do the right thing. And I call it laziness, being kind of facetious in a sense, but it is easier for me to do the right thing than it is for me to scramble and lie and tuck and cheat. And let me just do it right so that I don't have to do so much headspace thinking. And I think in a moment of call to the carpet, he reached for something and just kind of threw it out, and then reached for something that was so egregious. Like if you looked at Eric's history of what he's been involved in as an officer, he's worked 3 different agencies. He went back from Pasadena PD when he went there for a brief time because it was going too slow for him. He wanted to be in the action and be out there doing some things. He's actually told me stories of things that he's actually been involved in pre the sheriff's department. So to say that he would not and would harm children and allow them to be harmed, in a word capturing that, it pinched my heart, because I know that that would never be him, with all that he loves about children and people's safety. Think about it. Let's just say hypothetically that was the truth. If everybody was suiting up and running out of the door, who's going to watch the children that are in the youth center?
Can you, for those who don't know the incident, can you explain this incident that you're talking about?
Well, it wasn't an incident. It never happened.
Oh, okay. The fake news. Explain the fake news.
And you know what? I can't stand that term. Just so you know, because people tend to repeat things, and I know you're being facetious when you say it, but that's how you get massive groups of people to have the same conversation. Like you say something long enough, and then everybody's kind of repeating it, and I'm like, okay, well, just because they said it doesn't mean it's the actual, true statement. But anyway, you look, I digress.
No, that's all right. No problem at all.
It was on the CBS. It was Wednesday night, and they did a candidate forum with, I believe, CBS and KCAL 9. And so the question, and I'd have to go back to actually watch it, but I think it was right around the time that Eric was speaking about what happened to his wife, meaning me. And the return from the sheriff was that Eric had, in essence, refused to respond to a school shooting that was happening right next to the building that we were in. Well, at first he said next to, and the school up on the other corner, but then he said that it was happening right in front of the building. So to even say that, and that's your return, she wasn't even really talking about Eric, she was talking about me, if that makes sense to you. Like, so you're talking about what happened to you, and your wife has had some history with him. And then suddenly Eric just said, hey, that's not my job. It doesn't line up. It doesn't add up. And it didn't happen. And so it's a frustrating thing to have someone just out of the blue, all of a sudden they lob a lie on you, and you're on screen. So you have to be poised, composed, restrained. You have to think about what was just said. You're now trying to figure out a way to respond. I don't know that I would have been as at ease with it to be able to respond in the way that Eric did. But it was actually on CBS with CBS and KCAL 9, and it was a candidate forum on this past Wednesday.
Okay.
So you mentioned a few things about Eric Villanueva in that article, and I just want to say for the ARC Republic audience, it wasn't just the lies that he told in that article. It was the lies he told that were rooted in anti-Blackness that I want people to pay attention to and get a chance to appreciate. Now, also, I know that you've had some dealings with another candidate, Cecil. I don't know his last name. I'm sorry, his last name escapes me right now.
Cecil Rambo.
Cecil Rambo. Yeah, Cecil Rambo is the other Black male candidate running. So I know that's a particular niche for us because it's mostly, Latino, Hispanic running, and 2 Black men. What is your dealings with him, and what would you tell people that would say, well, I'm either going to vote for Eric or I'm going to vote for Cecil? What would you tell them?
Oh, well, of course, I'm going to say vote for Eric because I'm his wife, first off. But again, I step into that role of the 27 years with the department. To be honest with you, I didn't work around Cecil Rambo. It's surprising to me with a lot of the things that I was involved in on the department, that a lot of the mentoring, because he's mentioned, and even Eric has come home from different events, and he's actually introduced Eric to other people in a room full of people and said, I mentored him. Or Eric reached out to me. I heard that on a couple of forums for me to mentor him. And I look at it as the condescending type of I gave him everything that he knows. The problem with that for me, because you're asking me of my experience, is that I've never really heard Eric mention anything about being mentored by him. And Eric has told me of people who have been influential in his actual life. I do remember Eric reaching out before even coming completely out about running for sheriff. And he reached out because he had been hearing that Cecil was planning to run, because I guess in the mindset, hey, that's something that's pretty severe, because unfortunately we sometimes vote according to whatever our race base is. So you can imagine there's two Black men running the race together, and the thought would be they're pushing against each other. People would look at that and say, hey, pick or choose, or have one step up and do. Well, Eric had called him, and at that time he says he wasn't running. And I remember Eric joking and actually telling him, hey, I'm just calling you. And I don't know if the conversation was more or less, hey, in case I decide to run, so I can let you know to kind of step back. Eric was like, no, I'm letting you know as a courtesy, because I wanted you to know who I'm going to be. I want to know who I'm going to be running against, so I know who I'm going to be. And it was a healthy banter kind of chuckle. But then there was the actual announcement by Cecil that he was running for sheriff. So he initially said to Eric that he wasn't, and then he announced. So I even told Eric, from my opinion, people would look at that and go, you already saw someone else announcing they were running. Why would you jump into the race? And everybody has a right to run, but I could see that being, and I've even had a couple of my friends ask me that, like, that splits the votes. And, those are the things that people are looking at. I have to tell you, my thought as a almost 27 year veteran of this department is who's going to be the best for the job. He was an assistant sheriff, had the chance to actually do the things that we're speaking of, that people are still crying out about. After decades, they're still actually asking for some of the same things. My position as a unit commander, when I was over food services, I didn't wait for my supervisor to tell me, Sidra, this is what I need you to do. I packaged whatever plan I was going to do, and I handed it to my supervisor. It netted the opening of a cafe. It netted a job position that had never been in place before that allowed people to promote. 71 promotions for 68 people. 67 new hires into that unit while I was there, after coming to that location with 49 actual vacancies. 80-hour training program for the first time ever for the line supervisors, the cooks that worked within the food services unit. And not once did I say, oh, I couldn't get permission from my supervisor. You know why? I packaged it in a way where she couldn't say no. Please go ahead with it. So my take on that is, it works for me when it's a title. And let me talk about titles for a minute. Those titles are anything above the rank that I now hold, which is lieutenant. Eric is also lieutenant. Anything above that rank, there's no test to get there within Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. It is basically you're picked and they place you in the position. And so when you tell me about a title, if it's a title, you sat next to me and we bubbled in and I lost and I got 67% on the test, you got 90. Hey, yeah, you did better than me. You deserve the position, but there is no testing process for anything captain and above. And that's so crazy. His title, yeah, it may sound good in my opinion, but how did you get that? How did we get to that point? So again, I don't ever remember him reaching out to me with, here, let me help you along, or here's some advice on some things, but he speaks a lot about mentorship, and that's pretty much all I can give you with him. The other stuff is kind of branched off because of it, to give it some context about the actual titles. They also lean on Eric being a lieutenant and Alex being a lieutenant. Well, the two, if you can imagine a watch commander, excuse me, if you can imagine a watch commander is the person that is at the top of the shift at a station. So they're in control of whatever 8-hour shift at a particular station or a jail or one of our facilities. Eric has worked advocacy, audit and accountability, internal affairs, youth programs. It's like you have a long list and you've been a unit commander before. Alex was a watch commander. So tending a shift of deputy staff and personnel and sergeants. So that's another side to that. The titles thing is what actually becomes a problem.
These are some of the things we tend to need to know as the civilians and the public about. Like, I didn't know that you can literally just be picked as a captain. There's not a test. There's not like a specific, I guess, road to being the captain, which also goes into hiring practices that we're going to talk about. But you bought.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Arc Republic. If you like what you see and you like what you hear, you can actually keep this mothership going. How? You can make a tax-deductible donation in several ways. One, Cash App us at Arc Republic Media. And you can also go on our website, arcrepublic.com/donate. As well, you can also donate to our fiscal sponsor and our sister organization at Black Farmers Index, that is Cash App, or also go onto their website, blackfarmersindex.com. We are two Black women-owned media organizations who share our profits so folk can thrive.